Religion has undoubtedly informed the issues that politicians choose to champion and often impacts a voter's decision at the ballot box, or many believe that it should. But people of faith or one religion do not vote as a bloc. To help us understand the ways in which religion and politics intersect, we're joined by Cherie Harder, president of the Trinity Forum. She formerly served in the George W. Bush White House as special assistant to the president and director of policy and projects for First Lady Laura Bush. And Michael Ware, the founder, president, and CEO of the new Center for Christianity and Public Life. He's also the founder of Public Square Strategies and directed faith and outreach for President Barack Obama's re-election campaign. Thank you both for being with us today. The midterms are uncovering new narratives about what's important to people of faith, with the economy and inflation at the forefront. Cherie, what does this tell us about how voters of faith are changing?
Right. Well, thanks, Montse. It's great to be here. It was the theologian Reinhold Niebuhr who said that politics is essentially proximate solutions to insoluble problems. And in any democracy, there's always going to be just the big problems that always sort of afflict us. The fact that there's always going to be more problems and more needs than there are resources, that there's going to be just changes in the challenges that face us. And so I think the focus on some of the issues that you mentioned is actually a helpful thing, as opposed to only focusing on some of the symbols of culture warring. I've worked in, as you mentioned, Republican politics in my past, through much of my adult life, and it was grievous to me that in the last presidential election, there actually wasn't a party platform that came out of the convention. In many ways, some of the issues that have been the most important to people of that party in the past were sort of ignored in favor of more symbolic warfare. So I think the focus on some of the issues that you mentioned is actually quite a helpful thing. The other thing that I will mention is a focus on some of the substantive issues is also a great sort of pushback against some of the fear and loathing that has characterized a lot of our political engagement in the past. We can talk about that more, but generally, that's exactly the kind of thing that pushes against positive resolution to some of our more pressing policy challenges.
A kind of restructuring and a hopeful outlook. That's great, Cherie. Michael, faith was a big part of what you worked on with the Obama administration, and then after your departure from that administration. Why was that a priority for you, especially hearing what Cherie just said?
Yeah, well, again, thanks for having us on, Montse. We live in a profoundly religious country. We live in a diverse country, a country of folks of religious belief and those who don't believe, but 70% or so of Americans believe in God. About 40% of Americans say that religion influences their daily decision making. And so in my view, in order to have a thriving democracy, that democracy has to be attentive to and inclusive of the sources of its citizens' values. And for many Americans, that includes religion. For many of them, religion is sort of, they seek for it to be the primary source of their values. And so that's why it was important. That's why it continues to be important. That was both institutionalized and structured. And it also is just the kind of thing that you can't avoid. If we're asking people to come to our politics and to use their voice, you can't then sort of suggest that, but faith has to be left out. Come with your voice, but faith can't be a part of that. That's not how it should work or could work. And so it was important that we gave voice to and allow people to speak to us with their full selves.
That's beautiful. Cherie, then what do you think the impact of faith will be on the future of the American voter if you have two administrations back to back who are interested in this infusion of faith? Are there opportunities here?
Oh, there's definitely opportunities. I won't pretend to be a fortune teller here. I've been wrong several times before in anticipating what voters might do. But there's a real opportunity in that, as Michael was saying, there's such an important role for people of faith to play. We're not just called, but even commanded to love our neighbor. and to seek justice and to seek the flourishing of the city in which we find ourselves. And all of that has a political dimension, working for justice, loving our neighbor, not just privately, but in terms of kind of how we structure our institutions and our relationships and our, in the power structures. All of that is vitally important. And so I think there is an opportunity to articulate and to pursue a different way forward that makes politics neither an idol. And I think there's been plenty of evidence in the last several years of people conflating, their primary, or what should be their primary identity of their faith with with a partisan identity, not even a political, but a partisan identity. And on the other hand, from idolatry, a disengagement, a retreat from the public work that we're called to. So finding a new path between the dangers of either idolatry or disengagement, I think is both the great challenge and the great opportunity ahead.
Michael, I'm sure you have thoughts on that as well. What do you say about the duty to vote?
Yeah, so it is not safe to engage in politics with your feet planted in politics. But as Cherie just alluded, the safest place we can be and the place where we need to be is engaging in politics with our feet planted in the gospel. And from that position, we could be of great help and great contribution to our politics and society. We as a citizen of the United States, you do not choose to have political influence. You already have it by the very nature of being a citizen. And so the choice is not whether you have that influence, but how you choose to steward it. We're in the stewardship role. We have the stewardship responsibility. And so I urge people to use their vote as best they know how, in a way that's oriented toward the well-being of their neighbors. And that's what we can do. We have an imperfect political system. God's totally aware. I often say, that sometimes Christians act as though they enter the voting booth, have to make a decision in perfect isolation, and then when they get out of the voting booth, they have to explain to Jesus what happened in there. and I want to encourage folks, Jesus is not surprised by anything in our politics. He knows who's on the ballot, and we just need to faithfully steward the limited but important influence that we have, and voting is a key way to do that.
Wonderful. Cherie, real quick, people of faith are often stereotyped as issue voters. Is this important or dangerous?
Well, people of faith, of course, is a very broad label because, as Michael was saying earlier, people of faith encompass the vast majority of Americans. And so it's hard to kind of stereotype about the vast majority of Americans. I think it is not surprising and a good thing for people to vote their values. But I also think that, as Michael was saying, and we both were talking about, love of neighbor should really kind of undergird a lot of how we think about the different issues that we're facing. So, it's inevitable that that people will be voting on different issues, and different issues will be more important to them. I think any type of stereotyping religious of Americans as voting one way or the other is going to be a little bit dangerous, just given the fact that you're talking about the vast majority of Americans.
That's exactly right. Okay, Michael, last question for you. As religious affiliation drops, we've seen that a lot, and secularism increases in America, why are political parties continuing to target people of faith?
Well, the trends are real and need to be contended with. But again, that is relative to America being an exceptional nation when it comes to religious affiliation. It stands out in the West. And so religion needs to be attended to from just the demographic perspective. And then I'd add, look, if we're going to have a thriving democracy, people of faith are going to have to be an integral part of that. They're going to have to be a part of informing in community the kind of nation and the kind of political communities that we're going to have for as we move deeper into the 21st century. And so it is it is smart and necessary for civic leaders to include religious people, not in an exclusive way, but just to say, look, if we want to build a healthy country in the 21st century, people of faith are a huge part of that. And we've seen what happens when people of faith are either excluded or the contribution they're making is not necessarily a positive one. And so, it's just a very important piece of the puzzle of building America's future.
A puzzle that we need to get right. Thank you both so much for being with us today.
Great. Thanks so much, Montse.